Hello, this is Jennifer Priest, and I'm here today to show you how to bind a fun little mini book using the Bind It All. Now, the first thing I did is I took a coverall from Zutter, and I just kind of decorated the front of the outside. So it's just really simple. I glued some paper on it. And what's cool about a coverall is that it actually acts like a book cover for your Bind It All book. So I'm going to take out this little plastic sheet that's in the sleeve in the back of the coverall, and this is actually going to be the back page of my album. Now, I just took a bunch of different 6x6 pages. I have some vintage flashcards here, some 6x4 chipboard pages that I covered with paper, a Meyer Road envelope that I just covered the back with paper, more 6x6 pages I covered with paper. This is actually the Nantucket line from Pink Paisley. And what I'm going to do next is go ahead and put these in the order that I want them in my book, and then I'll start punching. Alright, now that I have my pages in order, I'm going to punch them. And what I like to do in a project like this is punch them starting from the back to the front. So the first thing I need to do is trim my O-wire. Now, the O-wire from Zutter comes in a 24 loop piece, and this is enough to do a 12x12 book. So what I want to do is count my small ends of my loops, the little tiny side, and that's going to tell me how many holes, or how many holes I have tells me how many loops of wire I need. So I'm doing a 6-inch book. The Bind It All punches a hole every ½ inch, so if I punched every ½ inch for the 6 inches, it would be 2 times 6, so that would be 12. But there's a ½ inch gap on the top and the bottom of the page from the Bind It All, so it's 12 minus 2 holes is 10. Basically, I always just subtract an inch, and then I find out how many holes I need. So for 5 inches, 6 minus 1 inch is 5 inches. For 5 inches, I need 10 holes. So I'm going to count 10 loops. Now, here's where my loops need to be cut. You're going to cut on the straight side between the two wires. So now I have a 10-inch piece of O-wire. Now what I'm going to do is just lay my O-wire on the table, and as I punch, I'll thread my pages on from the back. Now this is the front of my pages, and on the back I took that plastic sleeve that was in the cover of the coverall, and I put that as my back page. Now, I'm not going to thread that on first, because what you want to do with the Bind It All is you want to have the seam where the wires close between this back page, or the back cover, and the last page in your book. So I'm actually going to take my back cover and put it on the front of my pages. Another thing is that when you're punching and you're using the coverall, this little plastic sheet has a sticker on it. I'm going to have my wires going on this side of the, or actually on this side of the pages. So I want my sticker to be opposite of that, so it will be hidden inside of the sleeve. So this is the front of my book, and here's the back. So I'm just going to lay my book on the table and start punching in order. So I'll be punching along this edge. Now what I want to do is set my Bind It All to C. So I'm going to press this little black lever all the way back, and then just one click forward is going to be on C. So you can see the little arrow there is pointing to C. What this does is it puts a ½ inch gap on either side of my page. So on the bottom of my page, there'll be a ½ inch gap before the holes start punching. And you can see that printed right here on top of the machine. There's a gap, and then the holes begin. So first, I'm going to take my very first page and slide it in the Bind It All from the left-hand side. The reason you want to slide it over is sometimes there are little chads that get stuck in this channel, and you want to make sure that those are out of the channel. So I want to make sure this is butted all the way up against the machine, the little black stop guide tab on the side of the machine. Now, sometimes your tab might be a little loose, and this just happens from wear and tear, or if you've dropped your machine, which I have done. And a good way just to kind of double check that your page is lined up correctly is you just want the edge of the page to be lined up pretty much with this edge of the machine. So you don't want it to be extending way out like that. Okay? So again, just to put it on C, I'm pushing my tab all the way back and one click forward. So slide it over and press my first 6 holes. Now, to get the holes on the other side of the page, what I'm going to do is put my page back in just as it was, I'm going to slide the stop guide tab forward, and then I'm going to slide my page over. Now, a general rule of thumb is that you want to put the peg into the 5th hole. I personally don't like having to count the holes, so for something like this, especially if your page is like 8 inches or less, the 5th hole thing doesn't always work. So what you want to do is slide your page over just until the top edge of the page is flush with the other side of the machine. So just like we wanted the 1/2 inch gap on this side of the page, we want the 1/2 inch gap on this side of the page as well. So once that edge is flush with the machine, you'll notice on the back of your stop guide tab is a tiny black peg. I don't know if you guys can see it on this camera, but there's a little peg back there that's the same size and shape as the bind it all holes. And what you want to do is just press that peg through the nearest hole. So you can see it's actually pressing through the back of the hole and sticking out. You want the peg to be protruding out. You don't want to do something like have the peg in the front here and move your page to meet it. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that that peg is pushing all the way through the hole. Alright, so that's going to make sure that our holes are lined up for this next section of the page that we're going to punch. So now I'm going to press the handle down, and now I have holes all the way across, but I have a 1/2 inch gap on the top of my page and a 1/2 inch gap on the bottom. And that's what we want. The reason for that is the O wires here have a little sharp edge where we cut them. So I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but it's sharp. And that 1/2 inch gap gives a little nesting area so that when these wires are in your book, nobody's going to snag themselves on them. The little edge of the wire is going to be nested there from the edge of the page. Alright, so once I have my first page punched, I'm just going to thread it onto my O wire. And I'll do this with all of my pages. Now this is a tag, so I'm just going to use my little eyeball method. I'm going to look at the holes printed across the top of the machine, line up the edges of my tag so that they're not halfway between any of the holes. I don't want to go like this because I'll get like a little bite mark out of my tag. Press down, thread my tag on. So the beauty of the bind it all is that you can do all kinds of different kinds of pages and things, and all different materials. These are vintage flashcards I got at a flea market. So you can work all kinds of different materials. Now this is a 6x4 page, but I'm punching on the 6-inch side, so I can go ahead and set my bind it all to C. Punch, slide my page over till this left edge is flush with the left side of the machine. Push my peg through the nearest hole and punch again, and I get my nice 1/2 inch gap on the top and on the bottom. So I'll thread that on, and I'll just continue doing all of my pages like this. Another eyeball method with this tag. These really big tags I have are from American Tag, and these smaller ones are Avery shipping tags that you could get in any office supply. Now this is a fun material. These are 6x6 acrylic pages by Zutter, and you'll treat these just like your chipboard. What's nice is that they punch really, really well. Okay, so I've slid my page over and put the peg through the hole again, and now I'm going to punch again. Now the Zutter acrylic, it is hard, but it's actually made to work with the Zutter bind it all. So it's totally safe to punch this in your machine. Now you might notice that it looks cloudy, or it's a little hard to see. It comes with a protective coating on the front and on the back, so you want to leave that on while you're punching. And after you're done punching, go ahead and remove it, and you'll have a crystal clear page. These are really fun for using rub-ons on, or stamps with a pigment ink or stays-on kind of solvent ink. So again, another 6x6 chipboard page, and I'm just varying the sizes of my pages, trying to keep some interest in my book. You know, I have some pages up and some down on these smaller ones that I'm making. Now on a 4x6 page like this, I could punch my holes along the long side, or I could punch it on the short side. So if I did it on the short side, it would sit in my book kind of sideways like this. If I did it on the long side, it would sit like this. So you could do either way. For this one, I think I might just do it on the short side. So what I'm going to do is set my bind it all to C. So again, all the way back and one click forward, punch my holes. Now I have a gap on each side, the 1/2 inch gap, and that would be great if I was only making a 4-inch book. If I try to thread this onto my O-wires, it's not going to work. What's going to happen is the parts here where the holes are blocked, the wire won't be able to go through. So I need to punch an extra hole here and an extra hole here. So what I'm going to do is put this page back in the bind-it-all, slide the stop guide tab all the way forward, and slide my page over and put the peg into one of the holes. What I want is this area here needs to have a hole punched in it. So I need to have that be somewhere here where the bind-it-all is going to punch holes. If this was my largest page in my book, I would not want to do this because I'm taking away the 1/2 inch gap. But because this is what I call a floater page, somewhere in the middle, I need to make that extra hole. So here I have an extra hole. Now I also need an extra hole on this side. If I was just going to have this be flush to the top or flush to the bottom, I wouldn't want an extra hole. But I actually want this page to be floating in the middle of my book. So I'm going to take this side, put this into the machine somewhere where the holes will punch, push a peg into the nearest hole, and punch again. Now I have holes all the way across the bottom. So I'll go ahead and thread that onto my book. Here's another vintage card, and here I just did something that a lot of people will do. A very thin item like this, they'll tend to slide it past the stop guide tab, and then you end up with your holes out of alignment. So again, kind of keeping your index finger here on the side of the machine will help you to make sure that you don't push your page past the edge of the machine. So again, I'll slide it over, push the peg into the hole, and punch again. And this just makes for a fun book. Now this is a Maya Road envelope, and this one's actually really nice because it measures 5 inches even. So I could do the eyeball method on it, but what's going to happen is I risk once I get to the end of having a little bite mark out of the side here. So what I'm going to do is start punching on it on C, because since this envelope measures in 5 inches, so it measures in 1/2 inch increments, I know if I start on C, I'll get a hole every 1/2 inch. So I'll punch it on C, slide it over. Now for this, I don't have to worry about punching off the edge because this is going to extend the full length of the wire. So I'll go ahead and push my peg in any hole, have the edge of my page here where the holes are punching, punch again, and you can see, oh, I did get a little bite mark. I think this might be a little bit bigger than 5. And sometimes that's just the risk you're going to take when you're kind of guesstimating on these items. So I'll punch the other side, and this side actually came out good. So just from looking at this, I can tell this is probably a 5 1/4 inch envelope, not 5 inches. That's what I get for not measuring. All right, so there's that.